I was standing in my empty house, hands trembling as I tried to install the security camera above the front door. The drill bit kept slipping, and I cursed under my breath. This wasn't how I imagined spending my first week as a homeowner. At 28, I had finally saved enough to buy my own place, a modest 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside Seattle. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Or so I thought. My phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. Sophie had posted another selfie, this time with mascara streaked down her cheeks and a caption that read, "Heartbroken when family isn't family anymore." I rolled my eyes and turned the phone face down. My 26-year-old sister had always been dramatic, but this was a new low, even for her. The doorbell rang before I could finish with the camera. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing on the porch, their faces stern and serious. Mom was clutching her purse tightly, while Dad had his arms crossed. They weren't carrying any housewarming gifts. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "Hi, Mom. Dad, what brings you here?" "We need to talk, Chloe. Right now." Dad's voice was sharp, more businesslike than I'd ever heard it. He looked past me into the house as if he was already appraising it. "I'm kind of busy right now. Can we do this later?" Mom stepped forward, her voice taking on that sickeningly sweet tone she used when she wanted something. "Honey, we're worried about Sophie. She's been so depressed lately, and she needs stability. This house, it should be hers." I let out a bitter laugh. "Hers? I just signed the papers yesterday. I've been saving for this for years." Dad's jaw tightened, and he pointed at the house behind me. "The foundation you built your life on came from us. We raised you, fed you, clothed you. Now it's time to give back. This isn't a request, Chloe." The audacity took my breath away. I stared at them for a long moment, these people who had given birth to me but never really been parents. Without another word, I closed the door and turned the deadbolt. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Dad had said about foundations. The memories came flooding back, unbidden and unwelcome. I was 17, working the closing shift at McDonald's, secretly eating leftover fries in the break room because I was too proud to ask for money for groceries. Meanwhile, Sophie was 15, unwrapping a brand new Canon camera for Mom and Dad so she could pursue her passion for photography. I had begged them for help with a $20 textbook that same week and been told that money was tight. 1 week later, I was in the middle of an important video conference with my marketing team when a delivery driver burst into our office. He was loud and obnoxious, clearly paid to make a scene. He slammed a thick envelope on my desk in front of everyone, announcing that it was urgent legal documents that required my immediate attention. My colleagues stared as I opened it with shaking hands. It was a lawsuit. My own parents were suing me. The legal documents were even more vicious than I had expected. They weren't just demanding the house. They were claiming I had manipulated the family's emotional bonds for financial gain and caused severe psychological distress to Sophie. They wanted compensation for what they called child-rearing expenses, calculated at an absurd amount that would have bankrupted me even if I sold the house. The worst part was reading their twisted version of events. According to the lawsuit, I was a manipulative daughter who had promised Sophie the house and then stolen it from her. They painted me as someone who had taken advantage of their generosity and love. I almost laughed at the irony. What generosity? What love? The legal battle consumed my life. Sophie launched a GoFundMe campaign titled, "Help Me Reclaim the House My Sister Stole." She posted videos of herself crying, telling elaborate lies about how I had promised her the house and then betrayed her. The comment section was full of strangers calling me heartless and greedy. The campaign raised over $3,000 in the first week. But Sophie's online campaign was just the beginning. Aunt Brenda, who worked as a senior manager at a tech company, started making phone calls to my company's HR department. She didn't file formal complaints, but she dropped hints about my psychological instability and financial desperation. She suggested I might be a security risk for the company. I received a concerning email from HR asking me to schedule a meeting to discuss external concerns about your professional conduct. The pressure was suffocating. I had worked so hard to build my career, to prove that I could succeed without their help. Now, they were trying to destroy everything I had accomplished. I felt like I was drowning in their manipulation and lies. My security cameras caught Sophie and 3 of her friends vandalizing my house at 2 in the morning. They threw paint-filled balloons at my windows and spray-painted thief on my front door. When I submitted the footage to the police, they filed a report but said there wasn't much they could do since it was a family matter. I was at my lowest point when my grandfather Arthur showed up at my door. I hadn't seen him in over 2 years, not since Mom and Dad had convinced me he was too old and confused to visit. He looked smaller than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp and angry. "Your father always told me you were too busy to see family," he said without preamble. Said you didn't want to be bothered with us old folks. I felt tears welling up. "I never said that, Grandpa. I thought you didn't want to see me." He pulled out an old leather journal and set it on my kitchen table. I figured, Mark and Linda are excellent storytellers, but numbers don't lie. This is every penny I've given them over the years. I think you need to see where the money went. For the next 2 hours, we went through Grandpa's meticulous records. He had kept track of every loan, every gift, every bit of financial help he had given my parents over the past decade. The picture that emerged was devastating. In 2019, he had given them $15,000 specifically for college expenses for both grandchildren. I cross-referenced it with my emails from that time, begging Mom and Dad for help with $120 for textbooks. They had told me money was tight, and I needed to figure it out myself. That same month, they had sent Sophie on a month-long photography tour of Europe. In 2020, Grandpa had given them $8,000 to help with emergency expenses. I discovered that Sophie had crashed her car while drunk, and they had used the money to buy her a new one. They never told me about the accident. The most damning evidence was a handwritten agreement from 2018, signed by Dad, acknowledging a loan of $25,000 from Grandpa. The agreement specifically stated that the money was to be invested and the profits would be used to ensure both children's futures equally. I had never seen a penny of those profits. In fact, I had never even known the loan existed. I stared at the documents spread across my table and felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about a lifetime of systematic favoritism, financial manipulation, and emotional abuse. They had been playing a long game, and I had been their victim for years without even realizing it. The next morning, I hired Patricia Chun, one of the best litigation attorneys in Seattle. She was expensive, but I was done playing defense. It was time to fight back. The day of the hearing arrived 3 months later. I watched my family walk into the courthouse dressed in coordinated white outfits, looking like innocent victims. Sophie had clearly lost weight for the occasion and wore minimal makeup to appear more sympathetic. Aunt Brenda had taken time off work to be there, glaring at me from across the courtroom. Their lawyer was theatrical and passionate, painting a picture of devoted parents who had sacrificed everything for their children. He talked about moral obligations and family values and the sacred bond between parent and child. He made me sound like a monster who had abandoned her family in their time of need. When Sophie took the stand, she gave an Oscar-worthy performance. She cried as she told the court about how I had promised her the house and then betrayed her. She talked about her depression and anxiety, how my selfishness had destroyed her mental health. She looked directly at me as she spoke, her eyes filled with what looked like genuine hurt. For a moment, I almost believed her myself. The lies were so detailed, so emotionally compelling, that I wondered if I had somehow misremembered our conversations. But then I looked at Patricia, who gave me an encouraging nod. She had the evidence. She had the truth. When it was our turn, Patricia was methodical and precise. She presented my bank statements, showing every deposit from my job since I was 16. She showed the court my mortgage application, demonstrating that I had qualified for the loan entirely on my own income and credit. She displayed my employment history, my tax returns, my savings account statements. Then she showed them the emails. Every request I had made for help over the years. Every rejection. Every time I'd been told that money was tight, while Sophie received expensive gifts. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Finally, she played the security camera footage. Sophie's face went pale as she watched herself throwing paint at my house. The judge's expression hardened as she saw the word thief being spray-painted on my door. But the most powerful moment came when Judge Margaret Harrison, a stern woman in her 60s, looked directly at my father and asked a simple question. Mr. Mitchell, you've testified that your daughter Chloe's success is due to your financial and emotional investment in her. However, the evidence shows that you denied her a small assistance request of $120 for textbooks. Can you tell this court what the last specific investment you made in Chloe Mitchell was, and when it occurred? The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. He looked at Mom desperately, but she was staring at her hands. The seconds stretched into eternity. That's when Patricia played her trump card. She presented Grandpa's journal and the loan agreement. The judge studied the documents carefully, her expression growing more disapproving by the minute. This court finds that the plaintiffs have failed to establish any legitimate claim to the defendant's property, Judge Harrison said finally. Furthermore, the evidence suggests a pattern of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. This case is dismissed with prejudice. She paused, looking directly at my family. Given the evidence of property destruction and what appears to be fraudulent fundraising, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for possible criminal prosecution. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Sophie's GoFundMe was shut down within hours, and she was forced to return the money she had raised. The platform banned her permanently for fraud. Her Instagram followers, once sympathetic, turned against her when the court documents became public. She lost her modest following and had to get a job at a coffee shop to pay her legal fees and the fine for vandalism. Aunt Brenda faced an internal investigation at her company after they received notice of the court's findings. She was suspended pending review and eventually terminated for abusing her position and damaging the company's reputation. She tried to sue for wrongful termination, but the case was dismissed when her employer produced evidence of her harassment campaign against me. Mom and Dad faced the worst consequences of all. When Grandpa's journal became public record, the extended family learned the truth about how they had been manipulating his generosity for years. Cousins, aunts, and uncles who had always favored Sophie began to distance themselves. The family that had once rallied around my parents and sister now saw them as the manipulative frauds they had always been. They were forced to sell their large house to pay back Grandpa and cover their legal expenses. They moved into a small apartment across town, their comfortable lifestyle destroyed by their own greed and vindictiveness. The text started coming immediately after the trial. Families should forgive each other. You're destroying us. We raised you better than this. I read them all, but I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, I felt no obligation to make them feel better about their own actions. 6 months later, I was in my garden, planting a lemon tree with Grandpa's help. We had grown closer since the trial, making up for the years that Mom and Dad had kept us apart. My rescue dog Max was running around the yard, happy and free. The house had become a real home, filled with warmth and laughter instead of tension and obligation. My phone buzzed with another text from Dad. When are you going to forgive us? I looked at the message and smiled. For years, I had felt guilty about disappointing them, about not being the daughter they wanted. I had tried so hard to earn their approval, their love, their respect. I had sacrificed my own needs and wants, thinking that somehow I could make them see my worth. But I finally understood that their approval was never something I could earn. It was something they had chosen to withhold. And their love came with conditions that I was no longer willing to meet. I turned off my phone and put it in my pocket. I didn't need to respond. I didn't need to explain myself or justify my choices. I didn't need to make them feel better about the consequences of their own actions. You know what, Grandpa? I said, brushing the dirt off my hands. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the final answer. He nodded, understanding completely. We continued planting the tree together, building something new and healthy from the ground up. The sun was shining, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free. The house was mine. The life was mine. The future was mine. And I was never going back.